we should not be the place to go when you're going bankrupt. I just want to make that clear. A grant takes time. You have to write you have to create your response to an RFP, a request for proposal. You have to do it right. You have to review it, and then it goes to the funding source. And just because you submit it, the funding source doesn't decide tomorrow that you're getting funded. They go through a process. They if it's a state or a federal or even city grant, then they have a date basically as to when they expect to fund the grants. Foundations have to have a board meeting, and people have to review. They have to check that you've met all the eligibility requirements before you even get into the hopper of what they're actually going to look at. So start looking now. Now is the time to look, and have that wish list of what your organization really needs. Keep adding to it, so when somebody sees something, they know it's really on that list. When somebody comes to GrantWatch, they have multiple ways to do their searches, and they can find something for their idea or project, as you said. But they have to be very open. Very open, meaning don't go into the dress shop knowing exactly what you want. Be open, be flexible, because you may find something that a funding source wants to fund that you can do, but you never thought that was going to be your project. And that could bring funding to your organization. You can't always say, well, this is what we want to do exactly, because you're not going to find it. In the old days, people would come to me and say, Libby, we need this big monster Xerox machine. Remember, it took up a whole wall, right? And then there was a contract with it and everything. How can we get it? And I would say, well, there's not going to be a grant for that. But if you're sending out newsletters, at that point, we printed them out and the children took them home from school. Right now, we email them to parents. But if you were printing out newsletters, even though you need it for other things, you could get a percentage of the cost of that in your budget. And that's how you have to think of things. Don't think that we need exactly this. How can you incorporate what you need into what the funding source is looking for?
So are grants, easy to apply for? And how are these different than loans for some of these organizations?
Well, a grant does not need to be paid back, as long as you follow the instructions. If you take the money and you think it's your personal piggy bank, you're in trouble. Okay, that's how people go to jail. People should really realize that. And on GrantWatch, we've written articles about this different times. When you get funding, open up a separate checking account, and you can nickname your checking accounts from your business or your nonprofit, nickname it the title of the grant. And every single penny that you spend with grant funds needs to already been earmarked in your budget. If it's not in your budget, you have no right to use the money for that. If you want to use the money for that, you call up the funding source, write to them, get permission to do a budget modification. Because with a grant, you have to submit paperwork as to how you spent that money. You need every single receipt, everything documented. And you should know this because that's your field, right? And if you get a loan, then you're borrowing money to do whatever it is you've asked to borrow the money for. I believe that the funding agency for the loan can also come at you and say, did you use the money for that or not? I mean, you can't borrow money for a car and then use it for a house, right? You have to be honest and forthright with whatever you're doing. The difference so a loan has to be paid back. But we found this new thing called a forgivable loan that came out during COVID. And there are people that are being asked to pay it back. Because if you get a forgivable loan through your bank, connected to the SBA, the IRS, the whole connection there, you have to spend that money exactly how you said you're going to spend it. And if you don't, then you owe the money. It's not going to be forgivable. And you have to be very, very careful, because once you spend money, how are you going to pay it back?
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. I agree. I've seen some situations where the eligibility was not met. There's very specific requirements to get those loans forgiven by way of converting to a grant. And even if you did use it for that purpose, what's important, if you don't have proof, meaning documentation to show this is where the money went, it's kind of, if you don't have proof, it didn't happen. So if you
Right.
can't prove that, it's kind of like you're guilty until proven innocent.
People don't realize that paperwork is so important.
Hmm.
It's the
Yes.
most important part of running any business is to
Hmm.
maintain that paperwork.
Completely agree. I tell people it's really the difference in reputation management. Even if there's nothing sketchy going on, if you don't have the paperwork to prove it, anyone can call into question your integrity or actions. And so, if you're not good at paperwork, that's okay. There's people out there that are good at paperwork.
That's right.
So hire those people to help them with
But
that. Are there categories for things like administrative expenses and paying for a grant writer? Do you know if there's any of those categories out there? And if not, or if so, what kind of categories are there?
so
Sure.
most funders will not pay for a grant writer because they believe that you should be able to speak well about your organization and write your own proposal. You should have that capacity within. So what can you do? If you don't have the funding for a grant writer, you have a few options. You could raise money from someone that supports your organization and say, look,
Mhm.
if you give us X number of dollars, we can hire a grant writer, and that is going to bring and make us more money. So you're helping us in a tremendous way. That seed money for the grant writer will be very helpful. And whatever a grant writer does, even if you don't receive that grant award, you now have a great piece of writing that you can
Mhm.
tweak. And at some point, you can just write the grant yourself. You can do some
Mm.
small applications yourself. You asked me before, how difficult is it to write a grant? So if it's a one page or a 2-pager online, you may not need a grant writer. But if it's a
Mm.
100-page application, you definitely need a grant writer. So you have to take a look
Mm.
at the application and try to do a little bit of it yourself. Save some money by gathering all the paperwork yourself that's needed. So
Mm.
that's
Mm.
one way.
So I think a lot of people get really overwhelmed when they start dabbling in the grant writing space. Obviously, you've probably interacted with many of these small organizations, and when they start getting anxiety about this or struggle to have confidence in it, what do you tell them that grants are doable for small nonprofits or individuals looking to get this thing off the ground? What would you say to those individuals?
I say write your first grant yourself
Mm.
without a grant writer. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what it looks like. Just get it together. Because when you
Mhm.
do that, you gather all these documents that need to be
Mm.
in your online and your hard copy folder that will be
Mhm.
needed in future grants. So this
Mhm.
is a way to save money. Write your first grant yourself. Do
Mhm.
something small. That
Mm.
that's going to help focus your agency. Maybe you don't have a
Right.
mission statement written. Maybe whatever the accountant did initially when you opened it up, when you did it yourself, was just a one-liner, and it's really not appropriate. Maybe you want to rework that now. Maybe your board isn't appropriate for what you're doing, and I
Mhm.
know you help with that as well, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
So, right, because like on a Head Start grant, I remember they wanted certain types of individuals with certain background in their careers on that board. And a lot of preschools didn't have that. They had their
Sure.
mother, their brother, their sister, whatever, because they started small and now they've grown and they're going to Head Start.
Mhm.
So write your first grant yourself, go through everything, and forgive yourself if you don't win. That's
Mm.
that's the way to
Mm.
go. And then you're going to really be ready, and you're going to really see the need for all these different pieces that have to go into the application and where you need the help. It comes up all the time. Can I apply for the same thing from 3 different funding sources?
Yeah.
Yes, you can. You wouldn't do it in. So the answer is 3 different funding sources. Okay. So if you have 3 different funding sources, you apply to open up a class for a preschool
Mhm.
class,
Mhm.
and you actually win 3 different grants to
Mhm.
open up a class for preschool. Well, what happens is now you can open up 3 classes. You cannot
Mm.
take the 3 different grants and fund that one class because you've asked for a teacher, you've asked for furniture, all sorts of things for that classroom. So now you're going to open up 3 classes and you're going to have to figure out how you're going to attract enough students to your location
Sure.
to do that. And if you can't, then you have to give back.
Sure, sure.
Right.
If people are interested in hearing more about the work that you're doing or how to get in touch with Grant Watch, I guess what's the easiest place?
Support@grantwatch.com. We add new grants Sunday through Thursday, daily. And the number of grants on the website right now is over 7,000, which I'm really
Wow.
proud of that.
To another episode of a Modern Nonprofit Podcast, Libby Hikind. She is the founder of grantwatch.com.